Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy you could all be here. On this episode of the vlog, I'm going to be doing something really different, for me, and that's actually a photo editing tutorial. So welcome to the very first of many photo editing tutorials that I'm going to be having on my channel. I also haven't really gotten a proper name for this photo editing tutorial segment just yet. I'm still working on it. I do know that it's going to be involving the word tutorial, but that's as far as I've gotten. So when I do the next episode of this photo editing tutorial segment, I should have a proper name for you guys by then. But anyway, for this episode of this photo editing tutorial segment, I'm going to be showing you guys how to edit Moody portrait photos in Lightroom. And there are many different ways on how you can actually accomplish editing a Moody portrait photo, or any photograph in that fact, using Lightroom. But I'm going to be showing you a really simple way by just using the vibrance and saturation sliders, whilst also making just slight adjustments to your exposure settings, your shadows, and your HSL sliders. Before I jump into Lightroom to show you guys how I edit my Moody portrait photos, I just want to start off with why I'll be focusing more on the importance of the saturation and the vibrance sliders in Lightroom. And that's because using the vibrance and the saturation sliders and achieving a perfect balance between the two helps you achieve a very nice desaturated look, which what Moody photos are renowned for. Desaturated images are becoming increasingly popular in photography. I find especially in landscape and street photography. But I am seeing an increase in popularity when it comes to portrait photography as well. As counterintuitive it may seem, actually removing and desaturating color out of a photograph can be more effective in telling a story than adding more or increasing the saturation in color with your photographs. That being said though, there's more to making a strong desaturated photo than just messing around with your vibrance and saturation sliders. There are other tweaks that you need to make. So let's jump into Lightroom and I'll show you guys how. Now that you have Lightroom open, import the portrait that you want to edit. For my example, I'm going to be editing a portrait I took of my close friend Sandra. Now before I get started editing this photo, I just want to say please don't feel like you have to copy the exact same steps that I take when editing your photos. Everybody edits differently, so edit in the way that you feel most comfortable and confident doing. I like to begin my editing process by heading over to the Tone Curve Adjustment panel. And I like making a slight S-curve into the tone curve. And I do that by adding 3 points across the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. I like to drop my shadows, I like to keep the midtones in the center, and I like to blow out my highlights. As you can see now, I have a nice S-curve within my tone curve. From here, this is where I head over to the vibrance and saturation sliders to begin the desaturation process on my photo. So I'm going to head back up now to the vibrance and saturation sliders. But before I start playing around with the vibrance and saturation sliders, I just want to explain the difference between the two. Because I feel that most people think that they are the same thing, and when in fact that they're not. There is a subtle difference between them. So first I'll start with saturation. Saturation is the overall intensity of a color. It can be viewed as how far a color differs from pure white in the color spectrum. So for us photographers, that means it's a depth of color that's present within a photograph. So saturation adjustments apply themselves to all colors within a photograph, no matter their luminance. Where vibrance is a little bit different. Vibrance is different in that it only affects the color saturation whose luminance falls within the mid-tone range. Now that we understand this difference, we can really use the saturation and vibrance sliders to our complete advantage when trying to create Moody portrait photos. So I like to begin by adjusting my saturation slider, and I always bring my saturation down to at least -30 to begin with. And as you can see, my photo now looks quite desaturated. But I want to bring some of that color back, and this is where I'm going to use the vibrance slider to achieve that. So I'm going to head over now to my vibrance slider, and I'm going to increase my vibrance. Normally I like to aim between a +50 to a +70 depending on the photo. For this, I'm going to sit at about plus 67. And now, as you can see, more of that color is coming back into the photo, but it's not super poppy. From here, I'm going to make adjustments to my exposure, my shadows, and my white balance. My goal for the exposure and shadow adjustments is just to blow out the highlights a little bit more and crush the shadows a bit more. So I'm going to start off with adjusting my exposure and then work my way down to dehaze, and I'm going to finish off by adjusting the temperature. Now that I made those adjustments to my exposure and my shadows, I'm going to work on the texture and the clarity. So I'm going to come down to the texture, clarity, and the dehaze sliders and start off with the texture. When it comes to adjusting texture on a photo, especially with a model or any person for that matter, they all want that smoother skin. So adjusting the texture down into the negative part of things is exactly how you're going to achieve that. So I'm going to bring the texture down to at least negative 25 on Sandra. And as you can see, her skin is starting to smoothen out. Next, I'm going to adjust the clarity. Now with clarity, you can go two ways with it. When it comes to adjusting clarity, you can go two ways with it. You can either increase the clarity, which is going to bring out more detail, make your edges sharper and more defined. Or you can decrease the clarity into the negative world, and that's going to make the edges a lot more softer, but it's going to give it that dreamy look. So depending on your own style and the aesthetic and the theme that you're going for, you have a lot of creative freedom with the clarity slider. But for the photo that I'm editing of Sandra, I want to make it more dreamy. So I'm actually going to decrease the clarity a bit on this photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the clarity slider, I'm going to bring it down to about a negative 63. And as you can see, the edges all around Sandra and actually all around the photograph are very, very smooth and soft now. And that's how you achieve that dreamy look. Finally, I'm just going to reduce the dehaze just a little bit. And now the last adjustment I need to make is to my white balance, because to me, this photo is a little too orange for my liking, and I just want to reduce the temperature just to help balance it out a little bit more. So I'm going to head over to the temperature control slider, and I'm going to just bring that temperature down to about 4700. And now to me, this photo looks a bit more moodier, but it also looks more balanced. So as you can see now, with the combination of adjusting the tone curve, the vibrance and saturation slider, as well as the exposure and shadow controls and the white balance controls, my highlights are extremely blown out, my shadows are crushed, so are my colors, and it's just achieving that really dreamy, moody look that I'm trying to go for. So from here, I'm going to go down to my HSL slider because I want to start bringing a little bit of color back into the photo. So I'm going to scroll down to the HSL slider. And I'm going to start with my saturation, then my luminance, and then my hues. Like I said before, don't feel like you have to go in the exact same way that I go. Start wherever you want to and make your adjustments accordingly. I'm going to start off in saturation, and the only colors I'm really going to play with are the oranges, the yellows, the reds, and the blues, because those are the primary colors that are evident in this photo, and they're going to be the only sliders that I need to adjust. So first I'm going to adjust the saturation up on the orange just to make the oranges pop a little bit more. I'm going to do the same with the yellows. I'm going to bring the red up just a little bit. And as you can see on Sandra's top here, the blue is quite overexposed and oversaturated. So what I want to do is I just want to bring the blue saturation down just to balance it out a little bit more, just so there's an even consistency across Sandra's chest. From here I'm going to move on to the luminance. And I'm going to flatten out the oranges a little bit. I'm going to deepen the yellows. And then I'm going to move into the hue, where I'm going to just bring down the orange hue just to make it a bit more red. I'm going to do the same with the yellow. And for me, this is the only color adjustments I actually want to do to this photo. Now from here, I've only got a few more adjustments to make. I'm just going to make adjustments to noise reduction, the vignetting, and I'm going to crush the shadows a little bit more using the tone curve. So from here, I'm going to scroll down to the noise reduction slider. And I'm just going to increase the noise reduction to about 20. And the reason I'm doing this is for two reasons. One, to remove any unnecessary or unwanted grain or noise that's present in the photo, and two, just to help smoothen out Sandra's skin just a little bit more. From here, I'm going to head down to the vignetting slider, and I'm just going to add some vignetting to the photo. as you can see, there's a black shadow appearing on the edges of the photo and moving their way inwards. And the reason why I'm adding vignetting to this photo is for two reasons again. First reason, it adds a bit more mood and grunge to the photo. Second, and most importantly, it actually helps guide the viewer's eye to the main subject of the photo, which in this case is Sandra. And now that I made those adjustments to the noise reduction and to the vignetting, the last thing I want to do is just crush the shadows a little bit more using the tone curve. So I'm going to scroll back up to the tone curve, and I'm going to be only working with the shadow, so the lower left quadrant of the tone curve adjustment panel. And I'm going to grab this bottom point here and I'm going to lift it up. And as you can see with the photo, the shadows start crushing more and more and more the higher I go up. But we don't want to go too far. We just want to find that sweet spot. So for me, that sweet spot is about here. And I'm happy with that. So now if we hit the / key on the keyboard, you get the before photo, which looks very washed out, flat and boring. And then if I hit the / key again on my keyboard, I get the edited, more moody, grungy, more emotion evoking photo of Sandra. And there you have it. There's a quick, simple, easy way that you can create a moody portrait photo by making slight adjustments with your tone curve, your vibrance and saturation, as well as your exposure, your shadows and your HSL sliders. Now the magic in creating a moody portrait photo, or any moody photo for that matter, in my opinion, is getting your desaturation levels right. Playing with your vibrance and saturation sliders so you get an equal balance between the two that desaturates the photo enough, so therefore you can use your HSL sliders as well as your exposure settings, your shadows and your white balance to help bring back some of that color to get your photo to a point where you can tell the story that you want to tell. It's all in the desaturation. In all honesty, it's all in the desaturation. If you can get that right, and you start off there first. Now I know I said you don't have to follow the exact same steps that I took in your editing process. I started off in the tone curve. You might want to start off with your exposure and your shadows and work your way down. But I strongly suggest that you start off at least with your vibrance and saturation sliders. Get that balance right first, and then you can freely go to your exposure or your shadows, then to your HSL sliders or vice versa. Wherever you want to go from that point onwards, you can do whatever. Just start with the vibrance and saturation sliders first. Now, on that, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you took something away from it. I really hope you can take at least something from it and apply it to your own portrait photos to create something really moody, really grungy, really thought-provoking, and a very, very emotional storytelling photo. So all that's left now is please like, leave a comment and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next photo editing tutorial, which I'll have a name for next time. See ya.